Good morning, and welcome to day 2 of the Boston Comics and Color Festival. Day 1 was amazing, and day 2 is going to be even better. We have an incredible schedule for you today. We're going to start at 11 a.m. with Comics Connectivity to talk about how comics have woven their way into our culture. At 1:30, Moving Comics, sponsored by the Roxbury International Film Festival, where we'll talk to a couple of animators who will talk about their techniques and their journey to become animators. At 3 o'clock, Women Make Comics panel. We will talk to women creators about their experience in the industry and the importance of strong female characters. At 4:30, we have a one-on-one with a gentleman cartoonist, Keith Knight himself, who will talk about his work and what it's like to see his work brought onto the small screen. At 6 o'clock, we have a special event featuring animation from some of our animators and a program of performances, starting out with poetry from D. Ruff and an amazing musical performance by Cliff Notes. And if you're in the Boston area tomorrow, join us for the open air marketplace on the campus of Roxbury Community College. We have some amazing artists and vendors coming to share their art. It's going to be a socially distant, good time. Of course, we'll be complying with all the COVID recommendations, but that doesn't mean we can't have a good time and support some great creators. And if you can't make it out on Saturday, please go to our website, comicsandcolor.org, and support the artists. Thank you for joining us and enjoy day 2.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I hope that everybody is doing well. Welcome back to Comics and Color. I'm excited to be here with you first thing in the morning. This is truly an honor, a pleasure, and a great thrill to be the first panel on our Friday session of Comics and Color Festival 2021. My name is Barrington Edwards, and I will be moderating this panel of brilliant artists, scholars, and creators and educators who have, I won't say how many, but decades together of experience in the field of comics. And some folks you may know, other folks you will know. So listen, the names are on the screen, and I'm hoping that folks will do that multitasking thing and look up the links and look these brothers up. We're going to jump right into it. So this is the connectivity, comics connectivity panel where we're talking about the influence of comics and Black comics, especially on the world through things like literature, film, um, entertainment, and lifestyle. So let us begin. And I'm going to introduce folks first through their bios, which are incredibly, like, you'll understand how incredible these men are shortly. But first, I'd like to present to some and introduce to others a friend of mine and an inspiration of mine, Rob Stowe, and I'll read his bio. Rob Stowe is an accomplished artist, storyteller, curator, and teacher from Boston. He's worked professionally for 30 plus years in the comic book, advertising, and graphic design industries. His projects include Spider Man Adventures, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, Marvel vs. Capcom, Iron Man, Uncanny X-Men, X-Force, Wolverine, Nightwing, 52, Firestorm, and more. Whew. He has been published by Marvel, DC, Image, Top Cow Productions, Chaos Comics, Crusade, Dark Horse, Aspen, Lionforge, and others. He created and curated sequential art, The Next Step, a first of its kind 10-year traveling exhibition spotlighting the work of African American comic book artists and their contributions to the industry and popular culture. His work has been exhibited throughout the United States and internationally. He is featured in the books The History of American Graffiti, 2011, and Black Comics, African American Independent Comics, Art and Culture, 2010. Outside of comics, Stowe has produced art and illustration work for the music and entertainment industries. His long list of clients and collaborators include Camplo, Clear Channel, Cornerstone Promotions, Dinko D from the Leaders of the New School, Guru from Gangstar, Les Nubians, Red Pill Productions, The Fader Magazine, The Matrix Films, Time Warner, Tommy Boy Records, Tribeca, Virgin Records America Incorporated, and Warner Brothers. Currently, Stowe is the first African American artist in residence at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. His work is featured in the groundbreaking exhibition Writing the Future, Basquiat and the Hip Hop Generation. He and fellow MFA Boston artist in residence Rob Pro Black Gibbs developed the Mural Project, a multi-part project highlighting the intergenerational connections and importance of youth participation in cultivating hip hop culture. I could not be more proud to know and be friends with Rob Stowe. Um, I'm going to read all the bios and then we'll talk to our panel, and I'm going to fall back so you'll hear much less of my voice and more of theirs. So next, I'd like to introduce you to and present to others a good friend of mine, brother from another mother, Stacy Robinson. Stacy Robinson is an assistant professor of graphic design at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He was a 2019-2020 Nasir Jones Hip Hop Fellow at Harvard University's Hutchins Center for African and African American Research, who completed his Master's of Fine Art at the University of Buffalo. For the last several years, he has traveled internationally discussing decolonized future spaces. As one half of the collaborative team, Black Kirby, with artist John Jennings, Stacy creates graphic novels, gallery exhibitions, lectures, and workshops that use world building strategies to imagine new worlds inspired by design, hip hop, the arts and sciences, and the diasporic African belief systems. His latest graphic novels are I Am Alfonso Jones, written by writer Tony Medina, was published in 2017 from Lee and Low Books, and Across the Tracks, Remembering Greenwood, Black Wall Street, and the Tulsa Race Massacre, written by Alvern Ball, will be available in early May 2021. As I said, please go ahead and look up these artists, these amazing creators on your alternate device. Another half. So I will also, since we're talking Black Kirby, I will read the bio of John Jennings. John Jennings is a professor, author, graphic novelist, curator, Harvard Fellow, New York Times bestseller, 2018 Eisner winner, and all-around champion of Black culture. As professor of media and cultural studies at the University of California at Riverside, UCR, Jennings examines the visual culture of race in various media forms, including film, illustrated fiction, and comics and graphic novels. He is also the director of Abrams Comic Arts imprint, Megascope, which publishes graphic novels focused on the excess of people of color. His research interests include the visual culture of hip hop, Afrofuturism, and politics, visual literacy, horror, and the ethnogothic, and speculative design and its applications to visual rhetoric. Jennings is co-editor of the 2016 Eisner Award-winning collection, The Blacker the Ink, Constructions of Black Identity in Comics, and Sequential Art through Rutgers, and co-founder, organizer of the Schomburg Center's Black Comic Book Festival in Harlem. He is a co-founder and organizer of the MLK NorCal's Black Comics Arts Festival in San Francisco, and also SoulCon, the Brown and Black Comics Expo at the Ohio State University. We also are fortunate to have with us today another brother of mine. This is, I apologize, I'm getting up the bio. I had the bio ready. Joel Christian Gill. Joel Christian Gill is, please excuse me. Give me 1 second.
This is whiskey, just FYI. I'm just drinking whiskey.
Joel, would you like to introduce yourself and avoid all this awkwardness? I'll buy you an adult beverage.
Joel Christian Gill. He's sitting right here. He's right here. Anyway.
I'm Joel Christian Gill. I draw comics. I drew Strange Fruit, Uncelebrated Narratives from Black History, Tales of the Talented Tenth, which is the new volume, will be out in a couple of weeks. I am currently working on, I just did Fights, my memoir, One Boy's Triumph Over Violence, which was the 2021 Cartoonist Award Prize, and one of the 10 best graphic novels of 2020. And I'm currently working on Ibram Kendi's Stamp from the Beginning, A Definitive History of Racist Ideas in America. That's me.
Thank you very much. I apologize again.
No worries.
Trying to do 2 different devices, and yours was on my Google Drive, so I had to, and the iPad wouldn't read my fingerprint for whatever reason. So I apologize. Technology. When it,
it's fine.
All right, so
Hey B,
that aside, we're gonna move, Pat. We're gonna move along. So
Rob had a
I'm gonna
thing.
give you all a softball question. So we're talking once again about connectivity in comics, right? And how comics attaches to the larger landscape and how it gets into the collective consciousness and informs other things that we see in our life. This is a question for anybody. Anybody can answer this. If you had to choose one musician, any musician, living or dead, to bring their work to life through comics, who would it be, and who would you put together to make that happen?
Oh, that's hard. This is I'm like,
I know, just like a whole list just started going through my head.
My whole Spotify playlist just hit my head. Stacey.
Right. So I think the energy created in this moment, and I'll talk to give you guys like a couple of seconds to put together.
He was trying to get your attention a couple of times. So
who was?
Rob.
Okay, Rob.
say something before we got rolling.
Go ahead, please do.
Right off the top, I wanted to commend you and Kagan for your work, throughout the years with comics in color. I know you've been trying to get a hold of me forever. We finally made it happen, but I just wanted to commend you, man. And it's efforts like these that need to continue to be supported and are so vitally necessary and significant in these times, especially, and in this area in Boston, so this community can see and have firsthand account of what is capable, if they apply themselves. And it's all about continuum, right? I think the older we get as artists, we reach a certain point in our lives, in our careers, where the work we do has to mean something, or it has to begin to mean something. And I think with the panel you've assembled, that's a testament to that, to dedication to doing not only something that you love, but something that you know is going to resonate and remain and be lasting. And it's sort of in the spirit of the things and the early efforts that I was making so many years back. So I just wanted to give you guys your propers before we got started, and just say that.
I really appreciate that, Rob, because honestly, you specifically, and I probably fanboy way too much, and I consider you like a brother. I think you were part of my continuum from the very beginning. When I always remember this, and I talk about it, and you always say, yeah, B, we already talked about that. That when I came from Virginia back to decided to study art, two artists were instrumental to me, and it was John Biggers and Rob Stowe. John Biggers and Rob Stowe. Someone in Virginia put me in front of John Biggers, and someone in Boston another person, my man Reggie said, hey, you need to come, you want to do comics, you need to come talk to, my man Rob. And you helped create that continuum for me. And Kagan, this platform is trying to do the same thing. John has done this, for folks, and we're all a part of this continuum, and I agree 100%. So thank you for that support and that acknowledgement, that love. And we're going to continue because the work is continuing. We old, but we ain't cold, right? So I want to get on. And hopefully people thought a little bit about that. I know that question is going to be easy for Rob because Rob's kind of already done so many different collaborations with musicians. I want to save a little time at the end to take questions from people if people are up in multitasking. So anybody else or Rob, since you're here, anybody want to tackle that question? You guys got your top 5?
I don't even have a top 5. I would just do Prince. Honestly,
my stuff, man.
I'm just saying, I got the Prince comic. You can't see it over there, but just because day before yesterday was the anniversary of Prince's death, and so for me, this is not gonna go my students are watching right now, but 2 weeks ago, they told me they had never heard a Prince song. And so the entire class where they were working in the studio, I just played Prince, just completely just played Prince. And mostly because my hip hop, my life has been narrated by either hip hop or Prince. Those were the things I was a fan of Michael Jackson like everybody else, but not like I was a fan of Prince when I was a kid. And so if I could bring anybody's stuff, especially with all the stories that are coming out, I would love. And I don't know if you saw that thing that just happened on 60 Minutes. They did a thing on 60 Minutes about Prince and the people who are working in the archives, working in his working in his vault, which has handwritten, hand-drawn notes for Little Red Corvette, which has a little red Corvette drawn at the top. He wrote the words to it, right? And then all of that stuff. And there are people whose job it is to just listen to all of the music that's in the vault and suggest. That's all they do all day. 8,000 some odd songs. That's all they do every day is listen to these songs and decide what we're going to put out. I'm if I could quit my job and go do anything, that's what I would go do. Just sit in Prince's vault, going through his handwritten notes, writing it and deciding how to do this stuff would be just amazing. So that's my thing.
Joel, you said your students never heard a Prince song?
They were they told me they'd never heard a Prince song. They were I don't know. What's that?
Are you teaching 5-year-olds?
No, these are they're listening right now, so you can clown them as much as you want because I did.
No drama.
No, but you brings up a great point. It just shows you just how the generations of music and how people just kind of stop and start. We're really very self-centered as far as how music goes, I think, or just popular culture. Dang. But you took my dude though. That was what I was gonna say. But Stacy had his hand up first though. I saw his hand go up. I would like to know what you.
Yeah, I would do a book on John Coltrane. And it would focus on, the team I would put together is Rakim Allah, because Coltrane was a major influence to Rakim. And to help write and structure that book would be my very good friend, Bakari Kitswana. And damn sure I'd be drawing it. I'd be doing all the art. Yeah, so I would do that Rakim book, and then I would focus on the sacred geometry aspects and the science building aspects. For example, John Coltrane used a sacred geometry system to create giant steps, and I would compare that to the 5% Nations, Gods and Earths symbol, sacred alphabet, and supreme mathematics and supreme alphabet system. This is a project this is already a dream project, so it was easy to come off the top of the dome with it, because this is something I've been thinking about for a while, actually.
I don't even know. I mean, because they took both of my people. And then I was gonna say David Bowie, but there's been like a couple of David Bowie joints because I'm a huge David Bowie fan too. But probably Nina Simone, I think, because I feel like there's not enough attention to how brilliant that woman was.
Mm-hmm.
And besides, I mean, as far as like a team of people, I mean, we already like got a team. We got like Voltron right here. So we start here, right? Build Voltron with all these folk right here. You know, on
we're gonna form the head
and
roll out and make it happen.
I don't know. That should probably maybe Ashley. She could be the head. You know, she in the background listening. But I was just thinking about, like, I was listening to you know, I'm teaching this class on race and horror right now, right? And I was listening to Alice Smith's renditions of like Cinnamon and I Put a Spell on You, and I love her renditions of it, but you know, it's nothing like that beautiful, beautiful voice that would come out of that woman's body, and just like her politics. And as far as like other creative teams, I'd probably look at someone like as far as like someone who's an ethnomusicologist. What's that cat's name? Gabriel
Solis.
Gabriel Solis, who's like, his specialty is like looking at like, you know, how jazz and the blues affected, you know, culture.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Besides y'all, I probably bring in people like, you know, probably like a Gill Ashby or like a Dennis Cowan or someone like that who has like a really crazy hand. You know, and what I mean by that is like it's not a pristine aesthetic. There's something that's like improvisational about the way they make line work. You know, and I've always been attracted to artwork that's a little bit more rough and raw and, you know, in the moment. You know, you know, I think folk like that could bring that. And then there's some newer folk like, you know, Odero Ibakwe, for instance. I really like the way he makes work. You know, it's beautiful line work. Or even someone like a Brian Christopher Moss, who seems like he's a chameleon of some kind. He's always channeling different styles. So, you know, people like that they could actually like really almost like improv, you know, do like a jam session on a comic book. And actually, I don't know if you read this book called Blue and Green. I don't think Stacey has, but it's the way that comic book was made is like a horror story based off of jazz. And of course, the title comes from the Miles Davis song. And the way that they made that comic was actually very improvisational. Like basically, they didn't know exactly how they were going to do the story, you know. So I would even come at it that way, where it's like a lot more in the moment improvisational, like off the dome, so to speak. So,
love it. I love it, and that is it, right? All those responses. That's why I asked the question, because I think it's such an accessible place for us, right? We listen to music, and music gives us a certain thing that we can start from. You mentioned improvisation, right? And we talked about this a little earlier as you came on. You have one of my favorite artists behind you, John. Speaking of improvisation, and Bill Sienkiewicz, and I'm looking for that in the world now, especially since indie creators have the freedom to do essentially what you want, right? And the audiences are wide open. So I'd love to see these collaborations of Prince. Like, I mean, the imagery coming out of Prince, or the imagery coming out of, you know, Miles Davis. Like, Rob, do you have another person? It's like someone that you haven't, like you still wish that you, like it could be any musician. Like, is there anybody else that you feel like you want to go back to and revisit?
Well, professionally, in a traditional comic book collaborative sense, no. I've kind of sort of transitioned into another kind of space with that. But when I thought musicians, immediately Miles came to mind. And I didn't go as deep with the other brothers on the panel. I'm not good at doing that kind of stuff on the fly. But so I don't know in terms of creative collaborators that I'd like to see flesh it out. I got a few that come to mind, but Miles stuck out right away for me because I think there's still a lot of mystery and intrigue and fascination around him, and not just in the brilliant music that he produced, but just his person. And I would like to explore that, and metaphysical aspects and things like that. I think that would be really interesting. I mean, he's just, as aloof as he was, and the demons that he was fighting, and but then the power that was there that he had to draw from to produce that masterful work. I'd love to dive deep into that and explore that. He's almost like a black Doctor Strange,
Mm.
but much more powerful. And it's almost like if you're a comic book fan and your standard fare is like the Hulk and Superman, you're gonna look at Doctor Strange and you're like, okay, how special is this guy? He looked like a lightweight, but no, he's probably one of the most powerful. That's how I see mine. Go ahead and berate him, and shortchange him, and second guess him, and then that's when he'll black back and blow you out.
I absolutely love that, and that's, see, this is what I meant. I don't have to moderate this because it's the transitions are built right there. You're talking about transition in your own personal work and someone who transcended a genre, and to me, I'm wondering, as we talk about comics connectivity and how comics influences the mainstream, we can look at jazz and how jazz transformed the United States culture, right? It went from bebop to all the way through acid jazz, right? And each one of those steps influenced so many other layers. And I would love to see, Rob, what that looks like, that next step for you, bringing that comics aesthetic and the comics, see, that sequential approach to work. I would love to see how that manifests. And I would still selfishly, I would still tell people that it's still comics. Like, 'cause to me, I see that through line.
Yeah,
Um,
say something else. It's intrinsic, and that's why I love the concept and the premise of this panel, because it, the comics influence and even our influence in terms of a black cultural aesthetic is it's apparent in everything we do and we see in everyday life and consume in everyday life. For example, when you look at culture and how culture breaks down, um, I'll start with the obvious, with hip hop. That went from a subculture to now global culture, and you can go anywhere on the planet now, and everybody knows what hip hop is. So it's when brands were co-opting, I'll say, dirty word, um, aspects of our culture. And if you saw, I mean, if the kids in your community were saying one day that, those grimy work boots that you see on construction sites they're cool now, Timberlands. Then you see that in an ad campaign, and the community rejoices because they know where it came from. If the community says Hilfiger is cool now because we say it is, then you see a Tommy Hilfiger ad campaign with things that reflect, the community. The youth always has their thumb and their on the pulse of what's hot. They always set the trends. They always dictate what's hot and what's not, and then everybody follows suit. So it's like the same kind of phenomenon where that marriage has always been there.
Been a rocky marriage at some points. Sometimes you didn't think you were gonna make it, but the marriage is still there. People are still hanging on, and
More tangible.
I agree. Yeah,
Before it was co-opted, now deals can be made.
Right. I I'm wondering, like Stacy and John, to a degree, your work with the Hutchins Center, Stacy, was sponsored by Nas, or well, not sponsored by, but based on like the fellowship created through. Can you say how that is similar or different to the co-option that we see that Rob is talking about, and how it's kind of mitigated? Like, can you talk about that a little bit?
I would ask the question first: how would it be seen as co-opted? What are we talking about? Are we talking about hip hop culture being co-opted, right? And then why would we use that word in reference to that question? So
Have you is it familiar? Is that a familiar? It seems as if that's a familiar question for you.
Yeah,
What's
well,
co-opted?
it is. And the point I'm getting to with asking that is because I want to be clear on what you're asking. But it's not the first time I've gotten a question that sounds like the direction I think you might be asking. That's why I wanted to be clear.
Okay.
And it's the idea that a hip hop archive is placed at Harvard, right? So a lot of people have asked the question, well, why not at an HBCU, right? And my thing about hip hop archives, right, or any type of archive, is that an institution that is going to archive an archive has to have the resources to do it, right? One thing, the desire to do it. And for example, I collect a lot of albums, a lot of books. I will have a lot of writing, hopefully, by the time that I pass. I want my research to be housed somewhere, right? But that has to be purchased. If it's not donated in full, it has to be purchased, right? So the point I'm getting at, and you can add on to that because I don't want to take up too much time answering the question, but many times the idea of a Harvard University having access to hip hop seems like a betrayal to the Black community, and I would disagree. Because the thinking that you have to apply there is that hip hop is not at Harvard when we go there. We are everywhere, right? We are ubiquitous people, right? Like Rob already just said this, right? Shouts out to Rob Stowe. That's my dude. I've been a fan. He gave me one of my first critiques. He gave me one of my first critiques at I think my first comic book convention, actually. So I got a.
It's hard not to fanboy.
Huh? Yeah, it's all about the fanboy. Like I'm geeking out, right? Like I'm a massive geek, right? But anyway, so the idea is that it should stay in the quote the hood, or it should stay like it was born out of you look at the birth of hip hop coming out of the early 70s. It was coming out of a 10-year period of a mass destruction of the South Bronx. Literally, as landlords were destroying the community by fire, right? Well, the idea is that it somehow is kept more real if it is not in the university, right? If it is not in the Ivy League, and it remains in the streets. And I disagree with that because Black people go into the military, so that means hip hop goes into the military. Black people go to college. That means hip hop goes to college. I am at a tier 1, research institution in the Midwest at the University of Illinois. And damn sure my work is surrounded by hip hop, like since 1979, right? So that means hip hop is with me. So the idea of co-opting, I would challenge, right? If that's where you were going with that question. I think it's important to have a space where where our culture is archived. And that doesn't mean that it cannot be, quote, in the hood. For example, the Universal Hip Hop Museum is being built in the Bronx, right? Hip hop can be in more, it's ubiquitous. It can be in more than one place at one time, right?
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So
go ahead. Finish your thought, please.
Nope, that is, I was just gonna, in closing, if that's where the question was going, that's how I would challenge that.
I apologize if it felt like it was a challenging question. Well, I don't really apologize because
question.
that's my pseudonym. I like to the Vexer is someone who makes problems where things need to be a problem, right? I like to start trouble.
But
And
I
to me,
appreciate that question though. Like
but
I
I
get
think
that a
that,
lot.
but yeah, the answer is brilliant though, right? Because you got to like we need more than one place, and
Right.
there can be more than one way to archive what hip hop and comics, our stories in hip hop and in comic books. Um, it, there are more of them now, right? The world's expanded. There are some questions in the chat that I want to get to in a few minutes. And we have a brother Herb Bond who has a few really great questions, especially connected to the idea of um, you know, the big two and indie self-publishers. And I want to transition a little bit because now there are a few, we're talking kind of about gatekeeping and opening up. And we have John Jennings here, we have Joel Gill, people who are out here just put in workout, and to the place where larger people, larger corporations are saying, hey, let me help you do this. Let me give you the space to do what you want, but let's help you get those stories out. Um, John or Joel, you guys want to chime in on that a little bit about how there's space being made for us to connect to other platforms and other media?
You want to go first?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so thanks again for being on. I mean, for letting me be on this panel with such amazing artists, and I'm really truly grateful for that. So I think over the last after the last few years, I mean, there's been kind of like a sea change. You know, the idea of the gatekeeper has kind of like it shifted a great deal. I think what's happened is several factors, right? I mean, you have the rise of Afrofuturism, as a cultural production space, which we were always ahead of the curve on. By the way, that's another reason why I put up the milestone piece was that pioneers like Rob, like Dennis, like Mike Davis, like the McDuffie, these people were like they were really challenging what the what the images and comics were looking like. People like Dawood Ayabile and Turton Lee. Um, there's just a plethora of folk who were pushing the boundaries back in the day. And what's happened is like society's popular media has finally caught up with us. That's how far, or is at least starting to, and say, wait a minute, this, the term Afrofuturism was coined like back in the 90s, like 93, and we were always thinking about these spaces because the Black future has always been something that's been like at the forefront of a lot of our work anyway. So still a radical notion. And in fact, if you look at what's going on in society this past week, So what's happened is there's been a sea change as far as like who in these spaces. Like for instance, the academics like myself, like Joel, like yourself, Barrington, like Stacy, like all of us actually. We grew up reading these things. We grew up like listening to hip hop. We grew up, in the middle of these things. And now we actually have a space where we can actually talk about this actively. And spaces like hip hop, like comics, are now becoming or have become spaces where they've been legitimized. Like, we are in a space now where like comics as a medium, as a study, has become its own separate entity. Like it's actually become like its own mode of study. Our friend Frederick Luis Aldama just put out a massive book, about the study of comics through Oxford. It's like a 700-page book from Oxford University Press. Because what's happening is now you can actually go and get an MFA in comics and sequential art, right? Where like these kind of like as Rob put it, like these subgenres, these subcultures have now become the culture, which we always knew. We always knew that was going to be the case. And the other thing too is like shifting demographics. You know what I'm saying? We are in a space where people of color are becoming, we haven't really been minorities, but now we're definitely not becoming not minorities. So who's going to be consuming these images, and then what voices are being like put to the forefront? So you have like imprints like mine, Megascope, or like Mariko Tamaki's Surely imprint, which is jumping off too. You have people who are doing stuff at HarperCollins, like Amistad, for instance, which is like, definitely focused on Black voices. And this is at HarperCollins. yeah, I think the writing's on the wall, and you also, the other thing you have is all these studies coming out of different universities around, like, people prefer to see diversity on screen. People prefer to see diversity in the media that they're consuming. The other thing is that they're leaving money on the table. We are in a capitalist society, and we've always used that to our advantage. Basically, we know now that the lie that black voices and black images don't sell has been shattered by so many different box office and Scantron. Do they still do Scantron? I'm real old. Do they still do Scantron? Anyway, but you see what I'm saying. And so that's what's happened with what's happening now is that you also realize that the folk that that have these connections to this particular like body of folk are people of color, are the people who are coming out of that community, and we need to be, and these are the folk that need to be looked at to actually like reach out and bring in a certain sense of authenticity, and also just new voices that you haven't seen before, and it's happening transmedia. So I don't feel like I was halfway babbling. I didn't have enough coffee, so I'm gonna stop now.
No, I think you hit it right on the head, John. I think like Black people, we've always just existed in places where we weren't supposed to be, right? Like we have always like we've always been in this place. Like it's just like people show up and they're just like, oh, Black people are here. Like you just didn't realize it. Like we are 13% of the population, but how much of American culture is dictated by what Black people do, right? Like pop culture, music, like fashion, all of this stuff. Like we are a small percentage, but we are a large percent of American culture. You take Black people out of America and culture completely changes, right?
Collapses.
The food, like beige chicken becomes the American food, right? Like not even like, you know what I'm saying? Like yeah, it's beige chicken. So I mean, like if you take that and you take hip hop, like as soon as like we had jazz, we had bluegrass, we had all of these musics, and then they get taken over by white people for a lot of places right now. Because if you think about like jazz musicians playing, like I always think of like old white dudes in fedoras and clubs, right? Like that's the kind of like thing that happened, but it was really a Black music, right? And every time somebody has taken our stuff, we've actually just reinvented something new, right? Like in the New York Times this morning, like you look at the New York Times, go to the landing page. So half of the landing page is about Black comics. It's right. About like this, about these ideas that we are putting out there, and we are doing that because we have been, like ignored for so long. This is just this whole thing that's happening with Black comics and Afrofuturism is cyclical, right? These ideas are definitely cyclical. This happened when Melvin Van Peebles wrote Sweetback's Badass Song. They were like, holy shit, there's money to be made in this. Like we can make money. Like we're going to throw money at it. So like we have to be careful of the vultures, but it's definitely a thing that we have existed in these places. And then people come and it's like, oh, Black people like comics now? Like we like comics for a long time. We've been drawing these things for a long time. Right. I mean, we're not young people, right? Like I was drawing comics in the 80s. I'm sure John and Stacey and Rob were drawing comics in the 80s too, right? We were in Barrington, we were doing that, right? Because we were looking at it. And when we were drawing comics, so like this stuff happened then, right? I wasn't drawing white kids that were superheroes when I was a kid. That's not what I was doing. I was drawing kids who looked like me, right? And so like we like indie comics has removed the gatekeepers from places. So like all the people out there who are like looking, like all of the people who are listening is like, how do I get into comics? You don't get into comics. You are in comics. Just start making shit right now. Yeah, just make it. Make it and put it out there. Like that's how people infiltrate these things.
Yeah, that's what I tell my students.
Well, I'm gonna say to piggyback off that too, and that's also part of what's happened is that, and this is not just about Afrofuturism, about Black culture too. Like, technology has shifted things so much, right? I mean, as far as like the chat rooms that that we used to have now become like social media, right? Like so now the social media has connected us in such a way that the isolated Black nerd now has a community that they can speak directly to. The rise of the prosumer, the producer consumer, you know what I'm saying? Basically, you can actually go to these different spaces like Lulu and Ingram Spark or what have you, and put out your book, and distribute it directly. So, you go around the gates, or you create your own table, right? You have like smaller companies like Vault and Rosarium and and so many others that are putting out like quality work, you know, and putting it out and actually getting attention from Hollywood and other spaces now, you know. The other thing is that the tools to make these things have become more ubiquitous too. You know, the startup capital to make something and put it onto the web and build an audience is, you know, you just have to build it, right? And so now what's happened is these larger entities, which only for the most part only had the fact that they're old. You know, that's the only advantage that they've had over an independent space is the fact that they've just been around longer. That's it. You know, and that's how they just had a head start. And you know, those particular types of relationships, they just don't matter as much in a connected world. So
Can Thank you. And I 100% agree. As I'm saying, this panel kind of runs itself. Um, but in the spirit of kind of poking the bear a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about. I don't want to talk about it. I want y'all to talk about it because
mm,
that's what y'all are here for. You brought the term transmedia,
yes.
right? And the term transmedia talks about one project or one brand that goes across different formats. I know that people here are all, to a degree, Renaissance folks, right? Can we talk a little bit about where you see the culture of comics and specifically Black comics moving to in a world where, as John is describing, is opening up platforms because yeah, we have Lulu and we have Indie Planet, we have places that you can print books, but we also have independent film houses that are coming up. People can, we have independent, anyone can go make their own sneakers. So, how do you feel that is going to either empower Black creators to make more comics and kind of connect with folks? And where do you feel like that energy is going? This is for anybody.
I jump on that.
Please do.
No, I think I'm just sort of listening to what everybody's saying and taking it in. And I think the last prompt you had, where we kind of got off on a tangent, a real lovely tangent about jazz and the ground that broke and how that transcended culture, and then how it reflected in the same kind of energy and spirit. Um, I'd have to go back a little bit first. 20 some odd years ago when I was living in New York, I had a studio, two great brothers, Karan Grant, shout out to Karan Grant, Chris Walker, shout out to Chris Walker. And our whole reason for forming the studio was we saw a lot of content being produced in entertainment, i.e., music industry, specifically hip hop, where they were using comic book inspired energy to sell their brand or to move or push their brand. And in our opinion, it was being done for a specific purpose. Um, and that purpose is what we're all talking about today, the influence that we have on other areas of media, entertainment, and popular culture. So we said, in our opinion, it just wasn't being done properly. Some of it was real crude. Crude isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we felt if this charge or not charge, if this uh, um, attraction is going to be used, or this is going to be a vehicle that's going to be used, then it should be done in the hands of the people that do it for real.
Hmm.
So, that's why we formed the studio to kind of put an end to, I'll say it, the knockoff comic book work that we were seeing popping up all over the place. Now, mind you, this is 2 decades ago. So, and at the time, me and Karan were regular artists on Iron Man. And of course, this predates all of the hype from Iron Man movies and Avengers movies like that. So, as a studio, we made some connections and worked with some pretty we had some pretty nice projects. We worked with Tony Boy Records. We worked for but the point is, that that embrace of our culture and the work that we do has always been. John mentioned Afrofuturism. When I think of Afrofuturism, I go all the way back to the 70s and the Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Mm-hmm.
And that was way before anybody was putting a specific label or directing it to a specific category, but it was always there. I don't know how you can't open up that cover and what is it? Not am I can't remember the all in all. I don't see how you can't open up all in all gatefold cover and not have that be a perfect representation of Afrofuturism. And to know that that was a collaborative process or effort between Maurice White and Shusei Nagaoka. And Shusei didn't speak English that well, and Mo didn't speak Japanese that well, but look at what they produced together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the universe, that's a vibe, that's energy. And I think that undercurrent has always been there, you know, in terms of the work that we do, the content that we put out there, and how it affects people and inspires and influences people. It's just the only difference now, as John was stated, the access to information is different now.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was breaking into the industry, if we didn't have the social media platforms and the ways of communicating that we do now, that would have made a world of difference for me and a whole lot of my colleagues back then at that time. But because we do, there's no longer excuses.
That's
You
right.
don't have to wait on a Marvel or DC. It's better that you do it yourself. Right now, it doesn't really make any sense to go through the traditional rituals of getting your ideas published. And the only reason, or the only advice I would give an aspiring artist who wants to work in this field, that field being comic books, if you want to work for a Marvel or DC, then do it because you want to work on comic book characters that you love,
Mm-hmm.
established properties that you, because you're not really going to get too much or too many opportunities to express your stories in that arena. That's all predetermined and pre-established and pre-arranged.
Yep.
Do it yourself. Create your voice, create your platform, create your energy and your hype and your following, and it'll come running to you because you're now the shit.
Absolutely.
So
That's
it's like
totally true.
that undercurrent of what we do has always been there, and it's always been powerful, and it's always been a proven seller. The difference between then and now is that it was taken and stolen. And when that happened, we knew what it was when we saw it. Now we can both come to the table. Both entities can come to the table and say, let's work.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, that's totally true. I think the difference is agency, as you're saying, Rob. I mean, you know, not sorry, but I was like, yeah, you said so many salient points that I think, all right, it's totally true. Like that you have more people now, more Black people, more people of color, more people from various backgrounds who are tastemakers, who have used their celebrity or their power, whatever, to open up doors and actually really, really change a lot of things. I've been talking to folk in Hollywood, for instance, fairly recently, and they're echoing the same thing. It's a very different mode of how you even get down now, you know, because as you're saying, like you're coming as equals, you know, you're coming as partners and not, you know, what can I do for you? You know, the language is even different now. The other thing too is like, as you were stating, back in the day, you would have to bring like these sample pages and you know, for DC and Marvel and such like that. They expect you to actually have made a book by now. You know what I'm saying? These days it's like, where's your graphic novel? Where's your script? You know, because now, you know, the mystery of how you do a particular type of thing in comics has been taken away by the internet, by educational opportunities now. I mean, we're all like teaching comics, you know, teaching people how to make, like literally that's what we're doing right now. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And we all are all teachers, and I can't express how much I appreciate like this brain trust of someone who referred to it. John referred to it as Voltron. Like, wow,
Yeah.
like this is like a this is like a Voltron Hydra. Imagine if this conversation were to keep going. I would hope that folks are following. I told you at the beginning of class to do your homework and get your other device open and hit the URLs. So I want to do this. We have about 4 minutes left. Um, and I don't like rushing at the end. I would love it if people could maybe populate the chat or just say where folks can see your work, connect with you, so we can continue these conversations. Um, I know that. Why don't we start with you, Stacy? Like, how do folks get a hold of you?
Mute it.
I'm putting that in the chat right now. You hit me up as Stacy A. Robinson on IG. Stacy is Stacey A. Robinson on IG.
And they can follow you. They can see what you're working on, pick up your merchandise, things like that, or your transmedia projects.
Yeah, you'll mostly in my story. You'll see that I'm on Facebook as well. So you can find me very easily on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter. I don't really like Twitter that much, but I'm on Twitter because folks are talking about me on Twitter. So I need to be present.
All right. I know the audience may not have access to our chat. We can make this popular. We can put it out. I'm sure Kagan and Ashley will reverse engineer. How about you, Joel? Can you say out loud how people can get a hold of you?
You can call my 1-900 number. Joel Christian Gill on IG and JCG007 on Twitter. I'm probably more active on Twitter. I mean, on Instagram and Twitter than I am anywhere else. But I'm also, Joel Christian Gill just about everywhere else.
Hey, Joel, what's your OnlyFans?
My OnlyFans. It's Joel Christian Gill .dadbod. I sell feet pictures.
Right. Y'all can hit me up on MySpace and Vine and Black.
Rob, how can the folks find you and connect with your brilliance, Rob? They can walk down the street, I know, in Boston.
If you're in Boston. No, robstowe.com. I don't like Facebook or Twitter, but we've got platforms on there. So, Twitter is robstowe24. Instagram is robstowe24. And what's the other one? That's it.
I will give y'all a hint. If you want to contact Rob Stowe, just do some dope stuff and wait, and he might find you if the stuff is dope enough. If it's not dope, you could just sit on your thumbs. John, how can folks get you?
Easy. It's just a site, johnjenningsstudio.com, and it has all my contacts and stuff there. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. I'm on Facebook a lot, probably promoting whatever shenanigans I'm up to. But yeah, John Jennings Studio has all my and I put in the chat too, so you can reach me there. And that has like links to Twitter and all those different places. But yeah.
Thank you so much, brothers. There's one question, the ubiquitous question that's always popping up when we do these things. People want to know who your favorite comic book character is in the 45 seconds that we have.
Comic book
do you have one? It's just as hard as asking about musicians, right?
Oh man, that's terrible. That's a terrible.
But that's something. Maybe they can find that on your IG page too. Anybody have a favorite comic book character?
I have a favorite mainstream character who is Spider-Man, Peter Parker Spider-Man. And my favorite indie character might be a character named Jason Wise by an artist who goes by the name of Uraeus. That is, he's up there as well. I don't want to necessarily separate the indie from the mainstream, but I definitely, Uraeus's Jason Wise is one of my favorite characters.
Excellent.
My favorite.
I would probably say Spawn. Spawn was my favorite character.
We got Spider-Man. We got Spawn. John.
My favorite superhero is Daredevil. Matt Murdock is, one of the toughest wildest characters. I mean, that dude, you have to straight up like kill him to stop him. I love that in that character. His superpowers, he's just stubborn as hell. And as far as like indie, I'm really in love with this character called Abbott, created by Saladin Ahmed. She's almost like if you took like Foxy Brown and merged her with Kolchak, the Night Stalker. I really like her a lot. So
Great. And as we wrap up, I'll give the final word to you, Rob. Do you have a favorite?
Thought if I just kept quiet, you'd forget to ask. I don't know. On my head, I'd say Storm, only because I don't think she's been developed as long as she's been around.
yeah,
As a character, she's been developed to all her full glory.
Yeah.
Has many more levels than we've seen the industry present to us.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for playing along with us. Thank you for this brilliance you just dropped on all of us, everybody. That was my tribute, my fan service. It's been my honor, my pleasure to talk with all of you who I consider to be good friends and mentors. Hopefully, the rest of the world now understands where to find you. Thank you for Kagan and Ashley, and I apologize once again publicly to you, Joel. So, Comics and Color fans, we have another coming up. We have another panel coming up at 1:30. It's Moving Comics and talk about transmedia. Folks are going to explore the idea of film and the connection to comics at 1:30. So tune in. Don't miss that. Stay fresh. Go make comics. Make it pop. Thank you, everybody. We're going to wrap.
peace.
All right. Thank you.